وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين واللعنة الدائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. القول مني في جميع الأشياء قول آل محمد فيما أسروا وما أعلنوا وفيما بلغني عنهم وفيما لم يبلغني. أما بعد، فقد قال الله العظيم في محكم كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ضرب الله مثلا للذين آمنوا امرأة فرعون. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. In these days we are commemorating the martyrdom of a great lady, the daughter of Amir al-Mu'mineen, the daughter of Sayyid al-Zahra, the sister of Imam al-Hassan wal-Hussein, and the granddaughter of the Holy Prophet Muhammad. And this great lady, everyone knows her story. However, there are certain aspects about her life that it is important that we shed light upon. And it is important that this lady is commemorated and is given the honor which she so deserves and which she has been given by Allah Azza wa Jal. And this honor that is bestowed upon her from Allah starts with her very birth. When we look at the story of the birth of Lady Zainab Salamullahi alayha, when she was born, very similarly to the story of Imam al-Hassan wal-Hussein, Sayyid al-Zahra asks Amir al-Mu'mineen, what do we name this child, this daughter of ours? What name do we give her? And Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam says that I would not name her before my brother and my master, the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him. During that time, the Holy Prophet was in travel. He was in travel, so when he returns, they ask him for this name. What are we going to name this granddaughter of yours? To which the hadith gets to the point, وَسَأَلَهُ عَلِي عَنْ إِسْمِهَا. Imam Ali asked the Holy Prophet, what do we name this daughter of ours? The Holy Prophet says, ما كنت لأسبق ربي تعالى فهبط جبرائيل يقرأ على النبي السلام من الله الجليل وقال له سم هذه المولودة زينب فقد اختار الله لها هذا الاسم. That the Holy Prophet says, I would not name this child before Allah gives her this name. To which Jibreel descends and he tells the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, that salutations from your Lord, and he says to name this daughter of yours Zainab. So this name is a name chosen by Allah Azza wa Jal, similarly to the stories of Imam al-Hassan wal-Hussein alayhima as-salam. And Zainab has many different translations, but the main one that we know is the root or the origin of a bountiful tree, a fruitful tree. That name is called Zainab. And it also has many other translations to that name. So after that, he receives the Holy Prophet news of what would happen to Lady Zainab, to which he cries. And Lady Fatima is baffled by this from the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, and she asks him, what makes you cry, O Rasulullah? To which the Holy Prophet responds to her and says, فأجابها بصوت خافت حزين النبرات يا فاطمة اعلمي أن هذه البنت بعدي وبعدك ستبلى ببلايا وترد عليها مصائب شتى ورزايا أدهى يا بضعتي وقرة عيني إن من بكى عليها وعلى مصائبها يكون ثوابه كمن بكى على أخويها. That, oh Fatima, I'm crying because Jibreel has told me what would happen to her and the different types of calamities that she would go through in her lifetime. And then he tells her, oh Fatima, know that whoever cries for her and the tragedies that she goes through, his reward is as if that person has cried over her brothers, as if he has cried over Imam al-Hussein, as if he has cried over Imam al-Hassan alayhim as-salam. So we learn from this hadith two things. Number one, that her birth and her name is a divinely appointed birth and name, like her brothers. And the reward for crying over her is like the reward for crying over her brothers, Imam al-Hassan and al-Hussein. And this is a great blessing that was with the presence of her grandfather, the Holy Prophet Muhammad. Now we look at her relationship with her father and mother. As we know, her father being Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, who was known for his eloquence of speech, and the level of which he would speak would be rivaled by no one at his time. Lady Zainab salamullahi alayha inherited this eloquence, inherited the presence of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, to which we look at one of the people that was present during the time where Lady Zainab was a war prisoner. And think about it, when someone, especially a woman, is going through such a tough time after what she went through, losing her family, her children, her brothers, and then she is captured as a war prisoner in front of her oppressor, that would break anyone. That would destroy anyone mentally, physically, spiritually. It would destroy anyone. But Lady Zainab was as strong as ever. And even when she would speak, it is as if Amir al-Mu'mineen was speaking. And that's what this person says. He says, وَرَأَيْتُ زَيْنَبْ بِنْتَ عَلِي عَلَيْهِ السَّلَامِ وَلَمْ أَرَ أَنْطَقْ مِنْهَا كأنها تفرغ عن لسان أمير المؤمنين عليه السلام. It is as if that person who witnessed, he says, it is as if Lady Zainab is speaking with the tongue of her father Amir al-Mu'mineen. And then he alludes to the presence of Lady Zainab salamullahi alayha, where he said, وَقَدْ أَوْمَأَتْ إِلَى النَّاسِ أَنْ إِسْكُتُوا فَارْتَدَّتِ الْأَنفُسِ وَسَكَنَتِ الْأَصْوَاتِ. Says that she waved with her hand as she was about to speak to tell everyone to be silent. He says, and as soon as she done that, the breaths were taken. It is as if there is no sound in the presence of Lady Zainab. That alludes to her presence, like her father Amir al-Mu'mineen. The eloquence of her speech from her father Amir al-Mu'mineen. And then we look at during the life of Amir al-Mu'mineen, how he would treat his daughter and the level of respect that she had within the house of Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. When they narrate one of the neighbors of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam in Medina, he says that I lived for many years with Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. He says his name is Yahya al-Mazini. He says قال جاورت أمير المؤمنين علي عليه السلام في المدينة المنورة مدة مديدة وبالقرب من البيت الذي تسكنه السيدة زينب ابنته فلا والله ما رأيت لها شخصا ولا سمعت لها صوتا. He says many years I lived right next to Amir al-Mu'mineen's house. However, in these many years that I lived with him, I did not hear a sound from Lady Zainab. And I did not even see a shadow from Lady Zainab in all of these years that I lived next to Amir al-Mu'mineen. And then he says, وكانت إذا أرادت الخروج لزيارة جدها صلى الله عليه وآله تخرج ليلى الحسن عن يمينها والحسين عن شمالها وأمير المؤمنين أمامها. Says that when Lady Zainab wanted to go to visit her grandfather Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi's grave, that she would leave at night. And when she would leave at night, Imam al-Hassan would be on her right and Imam al-Hussein would be on her left and Amir al-Mu'mineen would be in front of her. And then he says, فَإِذَا قَرِبَتْ مِنَ الْقَبْرِ الشَّرِيفِ سَبَقَهَا أَمِيرُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ عَلَيْهِ السَّلَامِ فَأَخْمَدَ ضَوْءَ الْقَنَادِيلِ. And when they would reach towards the grave of the Holy Prophet, Amir al-Mu'mineen would go in front of Lady Zainab and he would dim the lights of the grave. And Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam would ask Amir al-Mu'mineen, why would you do this, O father? To which he says, فسأله الإمام الحسن مر عن ذلك فقال أمير المؤمنين أخشى أن ينظر أحدا إلى شخص أختك زينب. He says, I fear that anyone would see the shadow, the physical aspect of your sister Zainab. Look how protective Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam was of his daughter. And in that is many lessons for us in our society. How protective we should be of our family. How respectful we should be of our family. How we treat our family. How we honor our family. This is a form of honor. When someone such as Amir al-Mu'mineen takes care of Lady Zainab to the point where he ensures that people do not see her. This is honor. How do we carry this out as the followers of Amir al-Mu'mineen? Of course, we would not reach the level of Lady Zainab and Amir al-Mu'mineen. However, there has to be some sort of education towards the future generations. How do we teach our daughters about the hijab? How do we teach our sisters about the hijab and the coming generations? We teach them through their role models, who should be Lady Fatima salamullahi alayha and Lady Zainab salamullahi alayha. These should be the role models. Because if we give them time during that period and we do not introduce them to the role models which are Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam, they will find other role models to look up to. And nowadays with social media and nowadays with a internet or a device that's connected to the internet, it is very easy that these young women of ours would find their role models in other people that aren't deserving to be role models, such as the influencers, the actresses, the actors, whatever it may be. But they pale in comparison compared to Lady Zainab, compared to Lady Fatima. But if they have not been introduced to that from a young age, it would be too late. We have to understand that we introduce our children to their role models, which is none other than Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. And that falls under the parents. That falls under the older brothers and sisters, the uncles and aunties. The older figures of the family have to work collectively to take care and to educate and to guide the child, to guide the children. It isn't just a one-person effort, whether it be from the mother or father, that the mother takes care and the father's always at work, or that the father takes care and that the mother is too busy elsewhere. This has to be a collective effort from the entire family. Sometimes a child wouldn't listen to their mother or father. Let the uncle talk to them. Let the auntie speak to them. Let the sheikh from the local mosque or the masjid or the Hussainyat have a word with them. It has to be a collective effort. This is what the Islamic society teaches. This is what the society that is raised with the education of Ahlul Bayt teaches us. That raising the future generation is a collective effort. It isn't an individual effort. It has to be from the entire community to raise this one child. And there is this beautiful saying in some communities, they say, the child that does not receive the warmth from its village will burn down the village just so it could get this warmth. That if this community does not give the proper care towards the future generation will turn against them. Will go elsewhere looking for inspiration. Will go elsewhere looking for role models. This has to be a collective effort from the family friends, from the community to raise the future generations. And none other should be role models such as Lady Zainab and the way her parents raised her. And that leads us to the relationship of Lady Zainab with her mother, Sayyidah Zahra salamullahi alayha. Many things did Sayyidah Zainab learn from her mother, even though she didn't spend many years with her. She didn't spend many years with Lady Fatima. What would it be? No more than 10 years, much less than 10 years she spent with her mother, yet she learned so much. One of the things she learned from her mother is patience and perseverance. And she saw that first in hand with what Lady Fatima went through when she was attacked, when her ribs were broken, when she miscarried her child Al-Muhsin. And then when Fadak was taken away from Lady Fatima, Lady Zainab witnessed all of this. She witnessed the hardships that her mother went through at such a young age. And she learned perseverance and patience from that. The fact that Lady Zainab, despite what happened to her, still stand up and defend her husband, Amir al-Mu'mineen. Stand up and defend for what is rightfully hers. To stand up and defend for justice. To stand up and to defend for what's right. Lady Zainab saw her mother do this. And that's the difference. She saw her do this. She didn't hear. Her mother didn't sit there and give her a lecture about what to do. No, Lady Fatima done it and Lady Zainab saw it. And that is one of the main ways that a child learns from their parents. The child doesn't learn from their parents if the parents keep saying, wake up for Salatul Subh, go pray, do not lie, do not do this. The child learns more when he sees the parent wake up for Salatul Fajr. When he sees the mother wake up for Salatul Fajr. When the child sees their parents not lie. When the child sees their parent give charity, do the right thing, attend Hussainyat. It's not with what the parent says, it's what the parent does. That's what Lady Fatima was to her daughter, Sayyidah Zainab. That she saw what Lady Zahra done in terms of standing up for what's right, in terms of all of these good things. She learnt it by actions, not by words. You can sit there and you can tell your child or the future generation the biggest lecture, the longest lecture, the most beautiful of lectures, but the child won't learn like how if you do it yourself. You don't need to say anything. Get up and pray. Especially at a young age, the child would want to do what you do. The child will follow you and will start praying. It's with the actions, not with the words. Lady Fatima, salamullah, so much so that Lady Fatima, in her speech of Fadak, who's the person that narrates the speech of Fadak? When you look at the chain of narrations that lead up to the sermon of Fadak from Lady Fatima, salamullahi alayha, one of the narrators of, or the main narrator of the sermon of Fadak is Sayyidah Zainab. So much so that Ibn Abbas, when he narrates the sermon, he says that I got this sermon from Lady Zainab, where he says, Rawat aqilatuna. This is what he says before he narrates the sermon of Fadak. Ibn Abbas says, Rawat aqilatuna an ummiha Fatima. And then he narrates the speech of, or the sermon of Fadak. He got it from Lady Zainab, salamullahi alayha. She also learned from her mother worship, salah, making dua for the neighbors. All of this she learned from her mother. And she would narrate that, where Lady Zainab alayhi salam would say, رأيت أمي فاطمة ليلة جمعتها في محراب عبادتها ولم تزل راكعة وساجدة إلى الصباح. That I saw my own mother with my own eyes in ruku', in sujood, on the night of Jum'ah, the night before the day of Jum'ah, praying and worshipping Allah, gaining closeness to Allah until the morning. Notice how Lady Zainab didn't say, my mother told me to go and pray, or my mother instructed me to do this. No, she said, I saw my mother do that. And this seeps into the child, this seeps into the future generations so much with the action that you look at it more than 50 years later. How was Lady Zainab with her worship? Where they would narrate Fatima al-Sughra, the daughter of Imam al-Hussein, where she says, لم تزل عمتي زينب في ليلة العاشر في محراب عبادتها تستغيث إلى ربها فلم تغمض لها عين ولم تهدأ لها رنة. That she said, I saw my auntie Zainab on the night of the 10th, ليلة العاشر, worshipping, praying to Allah, gaining closeness to Allah, and she didn't even sleep. Look how Lady Zainab saw her mother, Sayyidah Zahra, how she would pray, how she would gain closeness to Allah, and then she done the exact same thing, even in the most difficult of circumstances. Laylat al-Ashir, she knows tomorrow what's going to happen. She knows the next day what's going to happen to her brothers, her sons, her relatives, her family. But because she saw the actions of her mother, not the words, the actions of her mother, this implemented into her entire personality. And that's what you have to understand. You have to start teaching your kids at a young age. Lady Fatima would pray, and Lady Zainab, how old was she? 5 years old, 4 years old, 3 years old, would look at her mother. And because she saw first in hand how her mother was, that was her role model. And you see Lady Zainab, not only on the night of the 10th, after the tragedy of Ashura, she would still pray Salatul Layl, Lady Zainab. The night of the 11th. So after the tragedy of Karbala, they said we still saw Lady Zainab praying Salatul Layl. But because of the calamity, she prayed sitting down, but she still prayed Salatul Layl. Where does that come from? If not from her mother, Lady Fatima. Where does that come from? If not from her father, Amir al-Mu'mineen, who in his last days was struck while doing sujood. If these are the people you are going to live with, such as Ali ibn Abi Talib and Fatima binti Muhammad, what do you expect you will turn out to be? Someone like Lady Zainab, salamullahi alayha. This is what we have to learn from these two role models, such as Amir al-Mu'mineen and Lady Fatima, salamullahi alayhima. And we look at her relationship with Imam al-Hussein, and that is a very special relationship. Of course, Lady Zainab and Imam al-Hassan also had a great relationship. And Lady Zainab was very distraught after the death of Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam. But her relationship with Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam was something completely different. And we look at it when we see one of the scholars, they say this, they say, وَيَكْفِي فِي جَلَالَةِ قَدْرِهَا وَنَبَالَةِ شَأْنِهَا مَا وَرَدَ بَعْضُ الْأَخْبَارِ مِنْ أَنَّهَا دَخَلَتْ عَلَى الإمام الحسين عليه السلام وكان يقرأ القرآن فوضع القرآن على الأرض وقام لأجلها وقام إجلالا لها. The scholar says that it is enough to understand the greatness of Lady Zainab, the fact that some of the narrations narrate that when she would enter the room where Imam al-Hussein was reading Quran, Imam al-Hussein would stop, would close the Quran, would put the Quran aside, and he would stand out of respect for Lady Zainab. قام إجلالا لها. That is enough for you to understand the greatness of Lady Zainab, where one of the masters of the youth of paradise, Sayyidi Shabab Ahl Jannah, stands while he's reading Quran, stops reading Quran and stands out of respect for Lady Zainab salamullahi alayha. And their relationship was very special, that even when she was first born, she had a connection with Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Lady Fatima goes to the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him. She tells him, "O Rasulullah, I am seeing something very strange with Zainab, my daughter." And the Prophet asks her, what is it? She tells him, she says that, يا أبتاه أرى شيئا عجيبا من زينب. فقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وماذا هناك؟ فقالت سلام الله عليها أن زينب لا تهدأ حتى يدخل الحسين عليه السلام إلى البيت، فإذا دخل فإنها تتجه بنظرها نحوه وتطيل ذلك. He says that she's a newborn, but she continues crying except where Imam al-Hussein enters the house. As soon as Imam al-Hussein enters the house, Lady Zainab stops crying. And she continues to gaze towards her brother Imam al-Hussein. Even wherever he would go, she would turn her head and look at him. This is Lady Zainab, probably at 1 year old. She has just been born in her first months. And then she says, Salamullahi alayha, فإذا دخل فإنها تتجه بنظرها نحوه وتطيل ذلك. فبكى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله عند سماعه ذلك وقال إن جبرائيل أخبرني بما يجري على الحسين وزينب. That the Holy Prophet, when he heard this, he continued crying and he said that Jibreel told me what would happen to those two, signifying that there is a very close connection between Imam al-Hussein and Sayyida Zainab. Sharikatu al-Imam al-Hussein. She is the companion of Imam al-Hussein in this tragedy, in this calamity, in this movement, which is what happened to Imam al-Hussein on the day of Ashura. She is what continued this movement, what ensured that everyone heard about the calamity of Imam al-Hussein was Lady Zainab salamullahi alayha. So it is only right that we learn from this great woman. We gain our knowledge from this woman. We learn patience, perseverance, obedience to the representative of Allah through this woman. And this woman is a role model for all of us, not just for the women. She is a role model for the men as well. Like the Quran says, ضَرَبَ اللَّهُ مَثَلًا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا إِمْرَأَةَ فِرْعَوْنَ. The wife of Fir'aun was a role model to who? ضَرَبَ اللَّهُ مَثَلًا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. To all of those who believe, the wife of Fir'aun was a role model, not just for the women, for the men and the women. Lady Zainab is similar. She is a role model of perseverance, of patience, of strength, of closeness to Allah. She is a role model not only for the women but for the men as well. So we honor her on this night and we remember her, and we will continue remembering her for the coming years insha'Allah ta'ala. اللهم عجل لوليك الفرج والعافية والنصر واجعلنا من أنصاره وأعوانه ومن شيعته ومحبيه. وإلى أرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات رحم الله من قرأ السورة المباركة الفاتحة مع الصلاة على محمد وآل محمد.